Reborn back to the moment before the car accident. This time I ignored Toby's cries for help. I chose to save his quiet older brother instead. Liz, why didn't you save me this time? Toby was stuck in the driver's seat, stunned. I glanced at him and sneered inwardly. As everyone knows, I was in love with Toby. In my previous life, after I saved him, he had to marry me out of gratitude. After we got married, he hated me with a passion, believing that I was taking advantage of him and conspiring with his white moonlight to have me locked up in a mental hospital. It wasn't until I died that I realized that forced love is never sweet. In this new life, I took the initiative to stay away from him. But when his brother and I got our marriage certificate, Toby went crazy. After Roy was sent to, retained without replacement, for treatment. Toby was also rescued by his beloved young Giselle. He was lucky to only suffer minor scratches. Seeing me rushing over anxiously, he rolled his eyes in contempt and curled his lips into a cold smile. You say you don't care about me, but you're just following me like a dog. Sis, even if you wanted to catch Nanqing's attention, you shouldn't have risked Toby's life. If I hadn't arrived in time, Nanqing would have been in serious trouble. Jiang Giselle shot me a sideways glance, as if she wanted to crawl all over Toby. Her eyebrows were filled with contempt for me. But her words were full of self-praise. She was my father's illegitimate daughter, and we had never gotten along since we were little. But we both fell in love with Toby at the same time. We hated each other so much that we wanted to kill each other. I was in a hurry to find a doctor to check on Roy's injuries and didn't want to deal with her. As I passed by her, someone grabbed my hand forcefully. Toby furrowed his brow, and the smile on his lips vanished in an instant. Keep pretending. If you keep it up, I'll marry Giselle. I thought of how they had thrown me into a mental hospital in my previous life and tortured me to death. The anger in my heart was uncontrollable. I stared intently at his arrogant expression and said coldly, "Whatever. You?" Toby's eyes narrowed, and he looked surprised for a moment. He looked me over for a moment, then laughed mockingly. "You're just being stubborn. Don't cry when the time comes." The sound of footsteps grew louder as they approached. Song's father hurried over, retained as is, and, upon learning that the two Song brothers were safe, finally breathed a sigh of relief. "Liz, you have done us a great favor, and our two families are old friends. Rest assured, I will make sure that Nanqing marries you." Song's father thanked me sincerely. "No, I don't want to marry Toby." Before I could finish, Toby snorted lightly. A mocking smile appeared on his lips. "I knew you were going to use my parents to pressure me. Enough, stop pretending. If you don't marry me, are you going to marry my brother, that blockhead?" His voice seemed to come from his nose, full of contempt. He had always looked down on Roy. He never took him seriously in front of others. Mr. G also thought that Roy was insignificant and couldn't carry the weight of the Song family, so he had always looked down on him. But I knew that Roy wasn't as useless as they thought. "Nanqing, don't always tease Liz. Girls are sensitive. She is the legitimate daughter of the Young family. It's a great match for you." G's father's expression darkened. He glanced meaningfully at Jiang Giselle. Her status as an illegitimate daughter was completely beneath Song's father. Nanqing. The humiliation made Jiang Giselle feel extremely wronged. Her face was pale, and her eyes were red. She cowered helplessly behind Toby. "Dad, say something." Toby couldn't bear to see her looking so wronged. He glared at me, his eyes full of arrogance. "I'm not saying I won't marry you, but when we have children, they must be IVF, and we must use Giselle's eggs." I was so angry I laughed. My expression suddenly turned cold, and I swept my mocking gaze over them. "You're delusional. How dare you?" Jiang Giselle thought I was scolding her and immediately started crying. "Giselle, don't cry. I'm here, and no one can bully you. I agreed to marry Liz, but my heart has always been with you." Toby was so worried that he fumbled around. He hugged her and kissed her tears away. But his gaze secretly darted toward me, carrying a warning. I didn't bother looking at their lovey-dovey antics and turned to run upstairs. But I was told by a nurse that Roy had already been discharged. Ever since Li Chuan's mother passed away, retained as is, he has been very resistant, retained as is. It's already very rare that he listened to you and came to, retained as is, bandage his wound this time. Song's father also followed over. He wasn't surprised by this result. He just looked at me thoughtfully, as if he had figured something out. Unable to see Roy, I could only go home first. Downstairs at home, I saw Toby's flashy red race car. He was pressing Jeong Giselle against the hood of the car and kissing her passionately. The young family's property is all with Sis. You have to promise me that after you help me get Sis's property, you'll divorce her and marry me. Don't make me wait too long like in my previous life. Jeong Giselle hooked her arms around his neck and batted her eyes seductively. Toby, however, seemed somewhat distracted. Let's talk about it later. Hearing this, I sucked in a breath of cold air. They had also been reborn. I composed myself and quickly walked past them. The ambiguous kissing sounds paused for a moment, and Toby's voice clearly reached my ears. Giselle, would you like me to give you this sports car? Really? Nanqing is so good to me. I remembered that shortly after we got married in my previous life. It was because he gave this sports car to Jeong Giselle that I became jealous and smashed the car with a rock. Toby used the excuse that I was sick and forcibly sent me to a mental hospital. I frowned and continued walking. Toby grabbed me and stared intently into my eyes. Liz, I'm giving the car to Giselle. What do you think? The color suits her well. Without thinking, I said with a smile. Hearing this, Toby's expression changed, and he remained silent for a long time before speaking with suppressed anger. There's a dinner party at my company next week. I'll let you be my date. I snorted, pulled my hand away from his, and turned to walk into the courtyard. I'm busy. I'll see how long you can keep this up. He was so angry he jumped up and down. But it didn't affect my mood. I was actually looking forward to next week's party. Normally, Roy would definitely attend such a dinner party. On the day of the dinner party, I dressed up carefully and arrived early at the banquet hall to look for Roy. As soon as I entered the hall, I felt a sharp gaze on me. Before I had a chance to look around, I heard Toby's arrogant and mocking voice. TSK, you said you wouldn't come, but here you are. What can I say about you? It's interesting how you say one thing and mean another. Toby was chatting with a group of friends, and the moment he saw me, his eyes lit up. I don't know what he whispered to Jeong Giselle beside him. Jeong Giselle glared at me resentfully and left reluctantly. Miss Liz, you really are persistent. Haha, maybe Mr. Song will be a henpecked husband in the future. Seeing this, the spoiled brats around him surrounded us and teased us. I pushed them away irritably and said angrily, go away, I'm not here to see him. Dressed like that, if you're not here for me, who else could you be here for? Fine, I know you're shy, so I'll be kind and let you be my date. Toby sneered at me and held out his hand as if he were doing me a favor. His friends laughed loudly, as if I were a clown. Even the best temper would be worn down. I stopped in my tracks and turned around. If you can't understand what people are saying, go see a doctor. I told you I wasn't here to see you, but you insist on making yourself look good. Everyone knows that a man can only bring one female companion. You're forcing me to be your date, but what about Jeong Giselle? Can you bear to watch her get kicked out by security? My voice wasn't loud, but it was just loud enough for Jeong Giselle, who was not far away, to hear. Already feeling wronged, she heard what I said and immediately started crying. Toby opened his mouth but couldn't say anything. Nanqing, can you really do this? The intense humiliation made Jeong Giselle unable to lift her head. Her face was completely pale as she covered her face and ran out crying. Liz, we're sisters, you're being so cruel. Toby finally came to his senses. He only had time to scold me before rushing out after her. Once they were gone, I felt the air was much fresher. But that burning gaze was still following me. Looking left and right, I saw Roy sitting on the second-floor railing. I don't know if it was my imagination. When I looked at him, the gaze on me disappeared for some reason. Seeing him get up to leave, I hurriedly ran up to the second floor and stopped him. Roy, wait. What are you doing here? Nanqing is chasing another woman, he's not here. He frowned, seemingly displeased at being stopped. But he still patiently explained to me. I was panting from running and nodded firmly. I came here to find you. Anyway, the Jiang and Song families will eventually be married, so I choose you. Roy didn't react much after hearing this. But his tightly clenched hands betrayed his inner excitement. He slowly raised his head and looked at me, his deep eyes filled with obscure emotions. Why? Looking at his tall figure, my eyes reddened. The image of the person I saw before I died in my previous life floated into my mind. Why are you crying? I didn't mean to scare you. Roy's indifferent eyes flashed with panic. He approached me awkwardly and spoke nervously. I wiped my tears and didn't plan on telling him yet. I pulled him back to his seat. I'm fine. Just tell me if you'll agree or not. You know that Toby's heart isn't with me. He only agreed to marry me because of the young family's wealth. So, I'll marry you, and you'll protect me. How about we split the family fortune in half? Roy still didn't say anything, just looked me up and down with a scrutinizing gaze. She took a sip of tea before slowly opening her mouth. Why do you trust me so much? Aren't you afraid I'll take all your wealth? After all, the young family is so wealthy, and many people have their eyes on it. His tone was calm, as if what I said didn't interest him at all. I was surprised that the young master of the Song family would break his usual silence and say so much to me. Even with Song's father, he had never been this patient. I couldn't help but feel a wave of warmth rise in my heart. I smiled slightly, as bright as a spring flower. I'm not afraid. You're not that kind of person. You? Roy was taken aback and couldn't help but stare. He then laughed softly. Okay. Having settled things with him, I was so excited that I grabbed his hand. All right, I'll come find you on Valentine's Day to get married. I remember the warmth of those hands. They were the hands that buried me in my previous life. For a while after that, Toby came to my house frequently. He never came inside, just stood below my window and flirted with Jeong Giselle. He said things like good brother and babe in a sarcastic tone. It made my ears bleed. I knew he was provoking me. But I didn't even bother to respond to his childish behavior. On Valentine's Day, he drove up to my house in a brand new sports car. Giselle, it's Valentine's Day. I have a surprise for you. Let's go. He deliberately looked in my direction and raised his voice as he spoke. Jeong Giselle didn't notice his little gesture and sat in the car with a happy look on her face. After his car left, I drove to the Song family's house. Unexpectedly, I ran into them at the entrance of the Song family's house. Toby leaned lazily against the door and glanced at me disdainfully. Liz, you finally couldn't stand it anymore, huh? I just took Giselle away, and you followed right behind me. I thought you had some backbone, but it's nothing special. All right, you wait here. I'll take Giselle to my room to talk about something. He hummed a song smugly as he wrapped his arm around Jeong Giselle and went upstairs. Jeong Giselle pretended to be shy and pushed him away. Goofball, sis is watching. Who cares about her? She's the one who's so high and mighty. I won't feel good if I don't knock her down a peg. The self-righteousness of these two left me speechless. If I had known they were coming to the Song family, I would have left later. An hour later, Toby finally came downstairs, hugging Jeong Giselle, who was so weak she could barely stand. He looked around but didn't see me. His face gradually darkened, and he pushed Jeong Giselle away and turned into the living room. Dad, where did Liz go? I told her to wait for me downstairs, but now she's gone. He was clearly in a bad mood. His expression was terrible. Song's father looked up from his newspaper and looked at him in confusion. Liz went to get her marriage certificate with your brother. Didn't you know? Liz really isn't marrying me? He jumped up from the sofa, his eyes wide. Finally realizing the seriousness of the situation, he turned and ran outside. Nanqing, you're in such a hurry, ouch. Jeong Giselle wanted to say something to him, but he pushed her hard to the ground. Roy and I were holding hands and returning from getting our marriage certificate when we ran into Toby at the door. He stopped abruptly, his gaze falling on the red book in my hand. His expression changed instantly, and his eyes shot fire. Liz, why don't you like me anymore? In our previous life, you couldn't live without me. Are you using my brother to make me jealous? He mentioned our previous life out of the blue, and I didn't know how to explain it to Roy. After all, who would believe something as unbelievable as rebirth? As I was hesitating, Roy let go of my hand first. He smiled bitterly and turned away, looking desolate. You two talk. I'm going upstairs. I knew he had misunderstood. But right now, I had to talk to Toby. Toby, we've both been reborn. You know what you did to me in your previous life. How can you think I would still like you? What do you have that I would like? Since you like Jeong Giselle, I'll let you have her this lifetime. Look, she's staring at you longingly from behind you. Why are you bothering me now? I thought I had made myself clear. But Toby just looked stunned for a moment, then smiled faintly as if he had suddenly understood. So you're jealous. You want to get back at me by using my brother to hurt me. But you're using the wrong method. I could never accept a woman who's been married before. Liz, missing out on me will be the biggest regret of your life. I couldn't be bothered to argue with him anymore. I walked past him and entered the Song family's residence. Because Roy and I were getting married today, Mr. Song had specially asked me to stay for dinner. Halfway through the meal, Toby finally led Jeong Giselle in. They must have gone shopping. Jeong Giselle was carrying large bags, all of them luxury brands. Song's father glanced indifferently at the smug look on her face, his expression darkening as he slammed his chopsticks down on the table. I'm full. After Mr. Song went upstairs to rest, Toby acted as if nothing had happened and sat across from me with his arm around Jeong Giselle. He opened each of the jewelry boxes he had bought in front of me. He glanced at me secretly and smiled mockingly. Liz, I told you you'd regret it. What's so good about following a blockhead? You're not well liked at work, and you're so broke you can't even afford a decent piece of jewelry. Look, I just went out for a stroll and spent thousands without even batting an eye. That's the difference, you understand? Sis, congratulations to you and Mr. Roy. I wish you 100 years of happiness. Jeong Giselle tried on the jewelry with a smile. Her eyebrows showed her contempt and mockery toward me. I ignored everything they said. But I had to take care of Roy's feelings. He kept his head down, but I could clearly see the malice in his eyes. I reached under the table and gently squeezed his clenched fist. He looked up in confusion, his eyes glistening. I smiled silently at him and calmly took out the share transfer agreement from my bag. Li Chuan, I am giving you half of my shares. Please take care of me for the rest of my life. Roy looked up suddenly, his expression shocked. But he couldn't suppress the smile on his lips. Liz, are you really willing to? Before Roy could finish, Toby stood up excitedly, knocking his chair to the floor with a loud crash. Liz, are you serious? He stared at me, his pupils constricting. After a long time, Toby finally found his voice. As if compromising, he smiled bitterly. I give up. Let's not hurt each other anymore, okay? I'll allow you to have children for me, is that okay? He turned his gaze to Jeong Giselle. A hint of struggle flashed in his eyes, but he still made the painful decision. From now on, I'll try to reduce my chances of seeing Giselle and try to be a good husband. Jeong Giselle's eyes were already teary. Hearing that he wouldn't even see her, she finally couldn't help but cry out. Heartbroken, she asked him loudly. Nanqing, you don't want me anymore? Why are you so different from before? You were always distracted when we were on dates, even going through the motions. You only showed affection when Sis was around. Oh my god, you wouldn't happen to like. Jeong Giselle seemed to think of something and gasped. Toby stopped her with a glance. She followed his gaze and looked at the share agreement in my hand. In an instant, she understood. She shot me a hateful glance, gritted her teeth in resentment, and ran out crying. This time, Toby didn't chase after her. The atmosphere in the living room was strangely heavy. He took a step forward and grabbed my hand. A complex light flashed in his eyes. Liz, maybe I do like you. You can't give these shares to him. I was stunned by his words. He actually said he liked me? Cough, I'm full too. Roy coughed lightly, his gaze on our tightly clasped hands. In an instant, his eyes darkened, tinged with self-mockery. He hurriedly got up and left the living room, his back shrouded in the night outside, looking particularly despondent. Roy! I panicked and forcefully broke free from Toby's hand. But the more I shouted, the faster Roy walked away. Angry and embarrassed, I turned to Toby behind me and shouted angrily. Listen carefully, I don't like you anymore, don't flatter yourself. Liz, I know I was too much in my previous life, but later I realized my feelings for you. When I heard the news of your death in the mental hospital, I wasn't. Toby kept chasing after me. I lost my patience and interrupted him. Enough, the past is the past. We've been reborn, and I hope we can live our lives without interfering with each other. Now I'm just your sister-in-law. I deliberately raised my voice for the last sentence. Roy, who was walking ahead, suddenly stopped in his tracks. His frown gradually relaxed, and his eyes lit up. Liz? He tentatively reached out his hand to me, his eyes sparkling with laughter. I smiled and placed my hand in his palm. Toby couldn't help but freeze in place, his face turning as pale as a sheet of paper, his eyes filled with confusion and anger. He muttered, "Liz, you don't love me anymore?" I didn't turn around and followed Roy into the courtyard to take a walk. Roy, listen to me. Since I've decided to marry you, I won't do anything to hurt you. You can keep this share agreement. As for Toby, I can only say that it's in the past. I don't like him anymore. I put the agreement back into his hand. I assured him with the most serious tone I could muster. After a long time, Roy finally held my hand back. He curved his lips, his eyebrows and eyes softening. I believe you. After that night, our relationship grew rapidly. I often went to song group to wait for him to get off work, and we would eat together. Once, I found a suspicious document in his office. Out of curiosity, I opened the document. I found evidence that Toby's mother had killed Roy's biological mother. The more I read, the more frightened I became. His reserved demeanor was all an act. The Song family's recent financial crises, big and small, were all his doing. He was taking revenge on the Song family for his mother. What a deep mind he had. What was I to him? The thought of how hastily we had gotten married sent a chill down my spine. Snap. The office door was pushed open. Roy stood at the doorway, his sharp eyes narrowed, emitting a fierce glare. Clatter. My hand went limp, and the documents fell to the ground. Li Chuan, I didn't mean to peek. Being stared at like that, I couldn't help but feel nervous. I lowered my head, not daring to look at him again. In an instant, he walked over and pulled me into his arms. He rested his chin on my forehead and sighed helplessly. You found out after all. Don't be afraid of me. I won't hurt you. I endured humiliation and hardship in the Song family just to avenge my mother. Liz, you're an exception. I didn't marry you for your family's shares. I just wanted the opportunity to take care of you. You probably don't know this, but I've liked you for a long time. He gently pushed me away and stared intently at me. After a moment, his slightly hoarse voice trembled slightly. Does next month's wedding still stand? I saw how careful he was. My mind raced, filled with all the kindness and care he had shown me lately. These were not things he could fake. No matter who he was, as long as he was sincere with me, that was enough. Of course it's still on. I smiled and hugged him back. His body trembled slightly, and he finally relaxed. He buried his head in my neck and mumbled, "Thank you, Liz. I've finally waited for you for 2 lifetimes." He said the last sentence too quietly for me to hear. However, I didn't have time to ask. He was busy customizing the most beautiful wedding dress in the world for me. The wedding dress was delivered to the hotel a day early, and Toby brought his friends along to join in the fun. He casually flipped through the wedding dress, a hint of contempt on his lips. This is cheap stuff. I've never even heard of this brand. Liz, I'm not trying to tell you anything, but your life will be much worse if you stay with him. Don't you agree? I thought everyone would laugh when he said that. But his friends stared at my wedding dress thoughtfully, their eyes filled with astonishment. Nanqing, this wedding dress is a high-end custom-made piece from Italy. It's the only one in the world and is said to be worth 100 million. What, 100 million? You must be mistaken. My brother is such a dull person. He doesn't even have a share in the Song family's company. How could he afford a 100 million wedding dress? He's just showing off. It must be a knockoff. Toby laughed arrogantly as if he had heard the biggest joke ever. His friend frowned and hurriedly checked his phone. Nanqing, it's real. Who is your brother? When he saw the picture on his phone, Toby's expression changed drastically. He compared it several times, and the smile on his lips disappeared. He stared at Roy as if he were a stranger. Impossible, he must have rented it. Roy and I ignored him and had someone pack up the wedding dress. I heard that he flew into a rage when he got home that day. In the end, I don't know what Jeong Giselle said to him, but he calmed down. I still felt uneasy. There was definitely something going on between those two. On the wedding day, I was very careful and tried to avoid contact with them. But Jeong Giselle was my father's illegitimate daughter. She used her identity as a member of my family to come to the dressing room to help me put on my wedding dress. Oh no, the wedding dress is ruined. Jeong Giselle cried out apologetically, but the corners of her mouth curved into a subtle smile. I checked the wedding dress and found that the sheer fabric at the neckline had been cut by something sharp and was no longer wearable. The anger that had been building up inside me flared up, and I lost my temper. I instinctively raised my hand to slap her. You did that on purpose. Before I could act, Toby suddenly burst in. Without asking a single question, he picked up his phone and started making a call. Hello, is this the Italian brand? My brother Roy rented a wedding dress and it was ruined. Come over and compensate him. What, he paid for it in full? After hanging up, his face turned extremely ugly, and his gaze toward me became even more obscure and difficult to discern. Roy walked in calmly. He didn't even glance at them as he passed by, giving me a comforting look. Liz, I've prepared a backup wedding dress for you. Try it on. Just as he was speaking, a waiter brought in an even more luxurious wedding dress. This one was even more beautiful than the previous one. Another high-end custom-made dress. Why do you get all the good things? Jeong Giselle glared at me with hatred, regretting her decision. Originally, she was supposed to marry Roy, but she looked down on him and insisted on seducing Toby to oppose me. Now it was too late for regrets. You're so rich, you hid it well. Toby felt his face was lost. He went crazy and smashed all the bottles and jars on the dressing table onto the floor. He came up to me with a gloomy face and pointed at me angrily. No wonder you fell in love with someone else. Did you know about this all along? You were after his money. Toby, she's your sister-in-law. Roy shielded me behind him. Uncharacteristically angry, he pushed Toby away without hesitation. What sister-in-law? Liz liked me first. She's my wife. Toby's anger was ignited, and he rolled up his sleeves, ready for a fight. Roy stood his ground fearlessly, his knuckles cracking loudly, seemingly eager for what was about to happen. Seeing that things were getting out of hand, I quickly pulled the two brothers apart. I pushed Toby out of the makeup room. Toby, stop causing trouble. In your previous life, you killed me, and it was Li Chuan who helped me bury you. What reason do I have not to choose him? Hearing this, Toby froze. His eyes were filled with resentment, and he shouted, Do you have any conscience? In your previous life, it was I who helped you bury you. Impossible. I widened my eyes, my heart pounding wildly. Before I died, it was indeed Roy I saw. Toby smiled bitterly, his voice low and hoarse. After sending you to the mental hospital in my previous life, I realized that I had fallen in love with you. Unfortunately, I was abroad on business at the time, so I had to ask Giselle to take care of you. He paused here, his tone heavy. But when I came back from abroad, you had already committed suicide. Liz, I wronged you in my previous life. Please give me a chance to make it up to you. I looked at Giselle in confusion. Sure enough, I caught a fleeting look of panic on her face. Noticing my scrutinizing gaze, she hurriedly averted her eyes. Yes, it was Nanqing who came back to collect your body. Seeing her guilt, I understood everything. She must have bribed the psychiatrist at the mental hospital and had me tortured to death before Toby returned. Today, I would tear off her hypocritical mask. Looking around, everyone was stunned by what we were talking about. I dismissed everyone else and decided to keep Roy here, lest he start thinking too much. Toby, you thought I was living well in the mental hospital, so you tried to kill yourself out of gratitude, didn't you? Toby was taken aback, but he hung his head in shame and muttered, I'm sorry. I know it was my actions that hurt you. Shut up. You know nothing. Every day in there, I was forced to take medicine, electrocuted, beaten, bound, and abused, all at Jeong Giselle's orders. On the day I died, it was snowing heavily. She threw me into a mass grave to be fed to dogs. It was Li Chuan who came to help me collect my body. He pulled my flesh from the dogs' mouths, piece by piece, and pieced together my bones so I could be buried. You said you helped collect my body? What kind of body did you collect? Her emotions seemed to have found an outlet. I finally couldn't hold back my tears and poured out all my grievances in pain. Liz, you still have me. Roy calmly held me in his arms. A few strands of hair fell over his forehead, obscuring his expression. I could only feel his body tense up, as if he was suppressing something. No, I didn't let anyone hurt you. It was you, Jiang Giselle, why did you do this? Toby shook his head frantically to explain. Suddenly, his body was filled with rage, and he grabbed Jiang Giselle by the neck. Jiang Giselle was scared out of her wits. She was incoherent and didn't even know what she was saying. No, I didn't use a fake corpse to deceive you. No, I mean I didn't throw Sis's body to the dogs. No, that's not it. Ah. Go to hell, Jiang Giselle. How could you be so cruel? Why? Toby understood immediately. The veins on his forehead bulged, making his face look hideous and terrifying. He started punching and kicking Jiang Giselle. She covered her head and curled up on the floor, unable to hold back her screams. It's all because I found out you loved her. If she didn't die, I wouldn't have had a chance. The air seemed to freeze, and the room fell into a deathly silence. After a brief silence, Toby kicked her again, hard, in the stomach, sending her flying across the room. Do you know who I met abroad in my previous life? Toby stared at her coldly. His low voice was cold and emotionless. I met your former nanny. She said you were a liar since you were a child. In order to get your father's attention, you always fought with Liz behind his back. Jiang Giselle, didn't you say Liz always bullied you? Explain why your nanny would say that about you. I didn't believe it before, but now I finally understand. The clown has always been me. You've been fooling me all along. He grew more and more excited, his face darkening to a frightening shade. Jiang Giselle lay on the ground, her face as pale as paper. She shook her head frantically, her pupils dilating. She opened her mouth to defend herself, but couldn't say a word. I didn't want to watch them fight anymore, so I was about to ask Roy to kick them out. Suddenly, I felt the strong hand around my waist loosen. Roy's face changed slightly and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Ugh. I turned around abruptly. The bloody scene before my eyes made my pupils contract rapidly. Li Chuan. He managed to smile at me weakly before fainting in my arms. The scene was in chaos. Roy was rushed to the hospital, retained without replacement, for treatment. The doctor said he had been poisoned, but fortunately, he was treated in time and his life was not in danger. Upon receiving the news, I reported it to the police immediately. After investigation by the police, it was discovered that the poisoner was Toby. You ungrateful son, was it really you? Song's father was so angry that he almost fainted. Toby snorted lightly, his tone casual. So what if it was me? My brother is just a good-for-nothing. He's dead, and I don't believe you'd sacrifice me for that worthless thing. Dad, Roy is just an illegitimate child. Is it worth getting so worked up over him? How can you face my mother? Today, Toby's mother, who was always eating vegetarian food and chanting Buddhist sutras, was also there. She stood in the crowd and lowered her head in shame when she heard his words. Song's father was furious and slapped him across the face. You bastard, who told you that Li Chuan was an illegitimate child? Looking at Roy, who was unconscious in the intensive care unit, I finally understood how difficult his life had been over the years. No wonder he had become so withdrawn and quiet. In fact, it was his way of protecting himself. A surge of anger rose in my heart, and I rushed over and slapped him hard across the face. I grabbed his collar and gritted my teeth, saying, Toby, you bastard. Your mother is the other woman. Strictly speaking, you're the illegitimate child. Back then, Li Chuan's mother kindly took your mother in to work as a maid for the Song family, but she seduced your father. To climb the social ladder, she secretly poisoned Li Chuan's mother, causing her to die a tragic death, retained as is. I read all of this in that document. Toby froze in place, unable to move. His expression was blank, and his voice trembled. Dad, is what she said true? Song's father didn't expect me to know the truth about what happened back then, and he was truly shocked. But faced with Toby's questioning, he still nodded. Mom? Toby couldn't accept this fact and turned his eyes to Song's mother for help. Song's mother was already sobbing uncontrollably, and the prayer beads in her hand were broken. They fell to the ground, making a crisp sound as they bounced. That's right. Back then, I was possessed by evil and did something ungrateful. All these years, I've been eating vegetarian food and chanting Buddhist sutras every day, but I still can't atone for my sins. Child, it is we who owe the Song family. You are being foolish. The moment the truth was revealed, Toby leaned against the cold wall and slowly slumped to the ground. He muttered to himself, his words barely audible. Brother, I'm sorry. He stayed at the door of the intensive care unit. It wasn't until early the next morning, when Roy was transferred to a regular ward, that he finally breathed a sigh of relief. After this incident, Song's father was completely disappointed in him. He stripped him of all his power in the Song family and officially handed the Song family over to Roy. Song's mother knew she was in the wrong and didn't dare to say anything. She obediently stayed in the Song family's old house and didn't go anywhere. This worried Jiang Giselle. She repeatedly asked Toby out and tried to persuade him. Your father is too biased. Why should he strip you of your power in the Song family? After all, you are also a member of the Song family. Half of the Song family should be yours. Jiang Giselle, I've told you many times, don't try to interfere. Even if the Song family were mine alone, I would never marry a woman with a heart as poisonous as yours. Now Toby despised her to the extreme. He didn't even want to say another word to her. Toby, if you don't marry me, who else will you marry? If you don't fight for me, I'll fight for myself. Jiang Giselle was so angry that she stamped her feet. Since Roy had just recovered from a serious illness, I took care of him day and night at the Song family's old mansion. After many days of hard work, I fell asleep at the bedside. Vaguely, I heard someone arguing and calling for help. I wanted to open my eyes, but I couldn't wake up. In the morning, I was shaken awake. The first thing I saw was Jiang Giselle's hypocritical face. Sis, even if taking care of Roy was hard, you shouldn't have let your resentment turn to hatred and killed Uncle Song and Aunt Song. Hearing this, I was instantly awake. Looking around, I saw Song's father and mother lying in a pool of blood, and I was holding a bloody knife in my hand. Ah! I screamed in fear. I hurriedly threw the knife on the ground. The police quickly arrived and took me away. I was arrested and detained according to the law. Liz, don't worry, we'll get you out. Roy and Toby came to see me. They didn't believe that I had killed anyone. After a month of investigation, the real culprit was finally found. It was Jiang Giselle. The surveillance footage from the Song family's old mansion that night was finally repaired. From the footage, it was clear that she had bribed a servant in the old mansion that night to put sleeping pills in our food. She then used this opportunity to force Song's father to hand over the Song family's shares. When Song's father refused, she decided to kill him and frame me. My suspicion was cleared, and I was released without charge. Unfortunately, Jiang Giselle had already received word and fled. The night I was taken back to the Song family's old mansion, she was hiding in my bathroom. When I was about to take a shower, she rushed over with a knife. Her face was cold and she had a vicious look in her eyes. I'm going to kill you. The two Song brothers are both under your spell. Why? What makes you better than me? I was cornered against the wall with no way out. At the last moment, Roy kicked the door open and blocked the knife for me. Jiang Giselle, you're the one who deserves to die. Toby heard the commotion and rushed in. Seeing what was happening in the room, he reacted quickly, subduing Jiang Giselle in a few moves and taking the knife from her hands. Nanqing, I did this for you. You can't hand me over to the police. When the police arrived, Jiang Giselle panicked. She begged Toby for mercy. But in the end, she was taken away by the police. Jiang Giselle was sentenced to death. On the day of her execution, she asked to see me. After not seeing her for a while, her long hair, which she was so proud of, had been cut short, and she looked haggard, as if she had aged more than 10 years. Sitting in the visiting room, she still held her head high with pride. A mocking smile appeared on the corner of her mouth. In your previous life, you died young. Do you want to know what happened after you died? She deliberately paused for a long time, satisfied to see the confusion on my face before continuing. Toby committed suicide by embracing your fake body. Before he died, he traded his soul and his life to the gods for a chance to bring you back to life. He wanted to start over with you. Haha, he sacrificed his eternal rebirth for yours. This is his last life, but what did he get in return? Ha ha ha. The gunshot rang out, and I broke out in a cold sweat. I quickly left the prison and saw Toby at the door. He walked up to me, smiled softly, but his eyes were filled with sadness. Do we still have a chance? No. I looked up at him with a complicated expression. I shook my head decisively under his hopeful gaze. I understand. He turned away dejectedly, his shoulders trembling slightly. The breeze carried his slightly regretful voice to my ears. If only I hadn't always tested you in this life, would you have looked at me one more time? I didn't respond to his words. That day, he boarded a flight and left the country. I never saw him again. 3 months later, Roy's knife wounds healed. I finally had the chance to confront him. Tell me, did you deliberately poison yourself on our wedding day? With his years of caution, there was no way he wouldn't have known there was poison in the wine. Roy smiled gently and pulled me into his arms. He dotingly tapped my nose. I knew I couldn't hide it from you. Because this was my chance to bring Toby down for good. The Song family is my mother's life's work, and I couldn't let it fall into someone else's hands. I nodded understandingly, smiled, and said nothing. Actually, I also knew he had been reborn. But we both knew it and never mentioned it. For the rest of our lives, we stayed together until we grew old. The end.